Last warning, clear the chair.
Officer, I literally cannot stand. I am paralyzed.
I saw you stash the goods. Get up or I'll make you get up.
You are making a massive mistake.
Watch me.
Welcome back to Truth Bodycam, where the lens never lies and every lie is dismantled frame by frame. I'm also 245TM, Riverside, California. A $4.1 million settlement triggered by a fatal assumption. Officer Miller saw a criminal in a wheelchair and tried to force a paralyzed man to walk. He was wrong. When Elijah hit the pavement, an officer's career shattered alongside his victim's dignity. Gravity is physics, but tonight, justice is inevitable. The camera doesn't lie. Let's hit play. The automatic glass doors of the Riverside Market slid open with a soft mechanical hum, admitting a blast of dry California heat before sealing the cool air back inside. Elijah Vance rolled in, the movement precise and practiced.
There was a distinct rhythmic sound that followed him, a sharp click, 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 caused by the impact of his leather gloves against the carbon fiber rims of his custom wheelchair. That sound was the audio signature of a man who valued precision. Elijah was not just a customer, he was a senior compliance auditor for a major logistics firm. His entire professional life was built on rules, regulations, and the absolute verification of facts. He lived in a world of black and white, where every action had a documented procedure. Today, however, he was just a man thirsty from the afternoon sun. He navigated the narrow aisle toward the beverage cooler, his eyes scanning the path for obstructions with the efficiency of someone who had spent 9 years navigating a world not designed for him.
At 2:48 p.m., Elijah stopped near the electronics aisle to adjust his seating position. For a T10 paraplegic, pressure sores are a lethal threat. Every 15 minutes, he had to perform a mandatory pressure relief maneuver, placing his hands on the armrests and lifting his torso slightly to let blood circulate back into his lower body. He shifted his weight to the left, then to the right, his face grimacing slightly with the effort. To the untrained eye, this looks like fidgeting. To a paranoid eye, it looks like concealment. But to a medical expert, this is a survival mechanism. Maria Lopez, the store manager, was watching the security monitor in the back office. The screen was grainy, the resolution low, and her patience was thin. The store had been hit by a theft ring 3 times that month, and she was on high alert. She did not see a medical necessity. She saw a man in a wheelchair shifting his hips suspiciously near the expensive power banks and noise-canceling headphones. She saw him reaching down toward his thighs to adjust his catheter tube. But in the low-resolution footage, it looked exactly like he was stuffing merchandise under his legs. Panic overrode logic.
Maria picked up the phone and dialed 911. "I have a shoplifter," she whispered urgently to the dispatcher. "He is in a wheelchair. I think he is hiding electronics under his seat. He is trying to leave." Elijah, unaware that he had just been profiled as a criminal, grabbed a bottle of alkaline water. He rolled toward the counter, his wallet already in his hand. He placed the water on the counter and tapped his card. $2.50. Transaction approved. He took the receipt, folded it neatly, and placed it in his shirt pocket. He turned his chair toward the exit, ready to go home to his wife. He did not know that his perfect driving record, his clean criminal history, and his encyclopedic knowledge of the law were about to be tested against a force that cared about none of those things. Officer Brad Miller's patrol car screeched into the parking lot at 2:52 p.m. Miller was a 15-year veteran of the force, but his recent performance reviews were poor. He had been reprimanded twice in the last quarter for his attitude and was under immense pressure to show proactive policing. When the dispatch call came in, subject concealing merchandise in wheelchair, Miller did not hear an allegation that needed investigating. He heard an opportunity. He did not park in a designated spot.
Instead, he pulled his cruiser directly in front of the handicap ramp, blocking the only accessible exit route with his bumper. This was the first violation of the encounter, but it would be the least of his problems. He stepped out, adjusting his heavy utility belt, his mind already made up. This is what psychologists call confirmation bias. He had decided Elijah was guilty before he even saw him.
Elijah was 3 feet from the door when it opened, and he found his path blocked by the towering figure of Officer Miller. The size difference was immediate and intimidating. Miller stood 6'2", looming over Elijah, who sat at a seated height of barely 4 feet. The sun was behind Miller, casting a long shadow over Elijah's face.
Where do you think you are going?
Miller barked, his hand resting casually but threateningly on his belt. Elijah stopped his chair instantly. He looked up, shielding his eyes from the glare.
Excuse me? I am heading to my car.
Not with that stash you are sitting on.
Miller said, stepping closer, invading Elijah's personal space.
Store manager says you were packing electronics under your seat. Let us see them.
Elijah blinked. The accusation was so absurd it took him a second to process. He looked at the water bottle in his lap.
Officer, I just bought a water. I have the receipt right here in my pocket.
I do not care about the water. I care about what is under your leg.
Miller pointed a finger at Elijah's lap.
We have been having a lot of theft in this area. You fit the description.
Elijah's demeanor shifted. The confusion evaporated, replaced by the cold, analytical focus of the auditor. He realized this was not a misunderstanding. It was a procedural failure in progress. He checked his watch, 2:54 p.m. He needed to establish the legal framework immediately.
Officer,
Elijah said, his voice calm but projected clearly enough for the store's security camera to pick up the audio.
Is this a consensual encounter, or am I being detained under Terry versus Ohio?
Most people beg or argue. Elijah cited case law. This is the first breadcrumb that hints this man is not a random suspect. He is testing the officer's knowledge. Miller stiffened. Police officers hate hearing legal codes from suspects. It challenges their authority and disrupts their control of the situation.
You are being detained for investigation of theft.
Miller snapped, his face reddening.
And if you want to play lawyer, we can do that downtown. Right now, I need to check that chair.
You can pat down my jacket.
Elijah offered, extending his arms to the side.
You can check my backpack, but I cannot get out of this chair. It is customized to my body, and I am sitting on a medical pressure cushion.
Miller laughed, a dry, humorless sound that chilled the air.
I have seen this act before. The wheelchair hustle. You guys think it is a magic shield. It is not.
The air in the store grew heavy. Other customers had stopped to watch, pulling out their phones to record. This public audience did not make Miller cautious. It made him aggressive. He felt the need to perform, to dominate, to show the crowd that he was in control. He walked around the side of the wheelchair, flanking Elijah and cutting off any potential retreat.
I am giving you a lawful order,
Miller said, his voice rising. Stand up. Step away from the chair. I need to search the seat cushion. Elijah looked at the officer's nameplate, B. Miller. He memorized it instantly. He took a deep breath, knowing that what he said next would determine the outcome of the lawsuit that was inevitably coming. Officer Miller, Elijah said, slowing his speech down to ensure absolute clarity. I have a spinal cord injury at the T10 vertebrae. I have no motor function below my waist. I physically cannot stand up. Asking me to do so is a violation of my civil rights and a physical impossibility. You were moving around just fine on the camera, Miller countered, pointing back at the store sore. I saw you lifting your hips. You have got working legs when you need them. That is called a pressure relief maneuver. It prevents necrosis. It is a medical necessity, not a dance move. I am done asking, Miller said. He reached down and unsnapped the pouch on his belt that held his leather search gloves. The sound of the Velcro tearing open, rip, echoed in the silent store like a gunshot. You are stalling because you are sitting on the evidence. Stand up, or I will assist you. Elijah gripped his wheels, locking the brakes tight.
He looked directly into the lens of the store's security camera above the door, tilting his head slightly to ensure his face was visible. He was creating a visual record. He was no longer speaking to the officer. He was speaking to the jury. I do not consent to this search, Elijah stated loudly, and I am informing you that if you attempt to move me, you will cause injury. My legs are atrophied. They cannot support weight. Notice the shift. The Elijah stops talking to the officer and starts talking to the courtroom of the future. He is building the record, line by line. Miller did not hear the warning. He only heard defiance. The compliance trap had snapped shut. In Miller's mind, a refusal to follow orders, even impossible ones, was resistance, and resistance justified force. He pulled the leather gloves onto his hands, tightening them around his wrists. He did not reach for the backpack. He did not reach for a handheld scanner. He reached for Elijah's arm. Miller did not hesitate. He hooked his hands under Elijah's armpits and heaved upward with all his strength, expecting the resistance of a man fighting back. But there was no resistance. There was only dead weight. Elijah's legs did not straighten.
They did not plant against the floor to support him. Instead, as his torso was wrenched from the chair, his lower body dragged lifelessly across the metal footrest. Gravity took over instantly. Miller, unprepared for the complete lack of muscle control, lost his grip. Elijah fell forward like a discarded doll. His face slammed into the hard linoleum floor with a sickening thud that silenced the entire store. But the horror was not just the impact. As Elijah hit the ground, a plastic medical device strapped to his leg, a catheter bag, ruptured under the force of the collision. Urine pooled rapidly around his paralyzed legs, soaking his jeans and splashing onto Officer Miller's polished boots. There were no stolen electronics. There were no headphones.
There was only a humiliated, injured man lying in a puddle of his own medical waste, gasping for air as pain radiated from his fractured cheekbone. This is my moment the good faith defense died. You cannot claim you made an honest mistake when the evidence of your cruelty is spreading across the floor. Miller froze. He stared at the fluid expanding around his boots, his brain finally processing the catastrophe he had just engineered. He instinctively reached for his chest, his finger hovering over his body camera.
The internal audit logs would later show that at 2:56 p.m., Miller attempted to mute his audio recording. He wanted to kill the sound of Elijah's groans and the gasps of the horrified witnesses. But he was too late. The store was already filled with the voices of customers screaming at him to stop. Maria Lopez, the manager who had made the call, stood behind the counter with her hands covering her mouth, realizing that her suspicion had just destroyed a man's dignity. 6 months later, the setting shifted from the chaotic aisle of a convenience store to the sterile silence of a deposition room. Across the table sat Julian Thorne, a civil rights attorney known for dismantling qualified immunity defenses. Next to him was Elijah, his arm in a cast, his face scarred. But Elijah was no longer just the victim. He was the expert. "Officer Miller," Thorne said, sliding a document across the polished mahogany table, "are you aware of the Riverside Police Department Policy 402 regarding interactions with disabled citizens?" "I am familiar with it," Miller mumbled, shifting in his seat. "Good," Thorne replied. "Then you might be surprised to learn who wrote it." Thorne pointed to Elijah. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. Elijah Vance was not just a compliance auditor for logistics. He was a serving board member on the City Disability Oversight Committee. He had personally drafted the addendum on wheelchair searches 2 years prior, the very protocol Miller had ignored. Miller had not just violated a policy, he had violated the author of the policy. I didn't know," Miller stammered. "Ignorance of the victim's resume is not a legal defense," Thorne countered. "But let us look at what you did know." Thorne played the video footage. It was not the shaky cell phone video that had gone viral on social media. It was the body-worn camera audit trail. Thorne paused the video at the 2:55 p.m. mark, exactly 30 seconds before the physical assault. "Officer, why is there no audio for this 30-second clip?" Thorne asked. There must have been a malfunction," Miller lied. "Incorrect," Thorne said, dropping the technical log on the table. "Exhibit B. The audit log shows you manually engage the mute function."
But you forgot about the pre-event buffer. Your camera captures 30 seconds of video before activation. And while we cannot hear you, we can certainly see you. Thorne hit play. On the silent screen, Miller was seen standing over Elijah. He wasn't looking for a weapon. He wasn't checking for safety. The high-definition video clearly showed Miller smirking, leaning down, and whispering something to the paralyzed man before grabbing him. A forensic lip reader had already certified the transcript. Miller had whispered, "Let us see you act now." That smirk cost the SPI $4 million. It proved this was not negligence. It was malice. The settlement was swift and historic. The city agreed to pay $4.1 million to Elijah Vance, the largest payout for a non-shooting excessive force case in the department's history. Officer Brad Miller was terminated immediately and stripped of his pension. He currently faces criminal charges for assault under color of authority. Maria Lopez was fired for filing a false report based on racial profiling. But the check was not the victory. The victory was the Vance Protocol, a new mandatory federal standard that prohibits officers from separating a disabled individual from their mobility device without a specialized medical transport team present. Elijah Vance rolled out of the courthouse the same way he rolled into that store, with precision, with dignity, and with the absolute certainty that the law finally worked, not because the system was perfect, but because he forced it to be. Elijah Vance proved that the most powerful weapon against tyranny isn't force, it's the truth, documented and delivered with precision. Officer Miller wanted to see if Elijah could stand. Instead, he forced the entire justice system to take a knee. If you believe rights are non-negotiable, hit that like button. The file is closed, but the archives remain open.